calling these bombings war crimes, will that actually make them stop?
No, they won't. And namely because, first of all, let's be very clear, Russia has categorically rejected these accusations, challenging anyone to bring proof, saying only the Syrian regime really can bring definitive proof. The Syrian regime says it sees no proof that Russian planes are behind this. You know, if intentionally directing attacks on hospital civilian infrastructure, according to the UN, if that were borne out and proven, yes, it would be a war crime. We're not there yet. What we can say is that affiliates of the World Health Organization on the ground, and this was actually new media, BuzzFeed was reporting this today, they said they saw an unprecedented surge in the numbers of attacks. I'll get to that chart in a second, not quite yet. They saw an unprecedented surge in the number of attacks on healthcare facilities in a single day on Monday. Now, we talked about one or two of those attacks. There were actually 7 on Monday, 7 in a single day, spread across Syria, 3 in Idlib province, 2 in Aleppo province, both in the northern part, and then 2 more attacks on hospitals in the south in Dera province. Now, what's interesting here, and now we could bring up that chart, is aid workers on the ground say that the Bashar Assad regime, and they do blame the Bashar Assad regime, is deliberately using these bombings as a strategy of war. That is, by trying to take hospitals out of commission, making life impossible for doctors and medical workers, and also making it impossible for people to live there and get medical care. You need doctors in order to be able to live your life. Look at this number, though. This is Physicians for Human Rights. They track attacks on infrastructure in hospitals. That's what they do for a living. They're based in New York City. Syrian government forces, 285. Now, I note this is over the course of the whole war. 285 attacks by Syrian government forces they've been able to determine. That number 12 is the number by Russian forces. You say it's a lot lower than Syrian, but let's remember the Russians only came into the intervention in late September, much more recent into the fray here. Russian or Syrian, they can't quite determine, but it's one or the other. 8. 19 is attacks by non-state armed groups. Only 1 by coalition forces, 11 by unknown forces, according to Physicians for Human Rights. Even more interesting, let me just bring up a second chart. This is a map of Syria. This might bring these statistics much more clearly to a graphic light here. You can see on that map, it's all along the western fringe of Syria. The northwestern sector there is around Aleppo, where we've seen a lot of those most intensive skirmishes in recent days as this conflict gets more chaotic and messier. Those turquoise circles are where Physicians for Human Rights say have been bombardments, missile attacks by the Syrian regime. The red ones, which are interspersed with the turquoise ones, are Russian forces. You can see that predominantly, almost overwhelmingly along that western fringe, the attacks they've been able to determine have been by either Russian or by Syrian or sometimes a combination, and they're not quite sure. You'll see one purple dot all the way over on the eastern fringe of Syria, all isolated. Yeah. That's the only one they've been able to determine by coalition forces. And I'll come back to one thing we said in the beginning. Russia categorically denying the accusations of war crimes, of targeting any of these facilities. The thing is, it actually blamed the U.S. The coalition, the U.S.-led coalition, says it has absolutely no activity in that area of Syria where these latest attacks have taken place. The Islamic State group is not based in those areas.
And, of course, when we're talking about international law, I mean, law works on terms of proof. These things should be provable to some degree. Can you tell us a bit more about what international law says about this kind of warfare? Very
briefly, it is banned under the Geneva Convention of 1949. You are not allowed to target civilians, hospitals, other civilian infrastructures, hospitals, medical staff, medical facilities, whether mobile or fixed. Do not target them. The only exception is if it can be proven that they are being used as a military facility. There are soldiers in there aiming at the other side. Then you can, under certain conditions. But they are absolutely banned, and they're supposed to be safeguarded. That's clearly not the case in this war, where Physicians for Human Rights again says that the Bashar Assad regime has been detaining, torturing, and executing doctors and sees their jobs treating those on the other side, wounded patients on the other side, as a crime punishable by death.